Integrated Science. This is Miss Satterley. Today I'm going to talk about the different scientists PowerPoint that was posted yesterday. Just a little review from last week. We talked about the different branches of science. So the different branches include physical, earth and space, life, and social science. So this PowerPoint is actually split up into those sections again, and they have some scientists that would fall into each of those categories. So first one, we're going to talk about physical science. First one is a physicist. A physicist is a scientist that studies energy and force. Energy is the ability to do work, and force is a push or a pull. Both of those concepts were introduced last week. This is just a couple pictures of some physicists doing some math problems on a board. Physics has a lot to do with math. Next one is chemist. Chemist is an individual that studies structure and matter, the structure and matter of atoms. So these two people are doing experiments with some kind of chemicals, and that's what chemists are all about. A biochemist is going to study macromolecules. There are 4 types of macromolecules. I have a picture over here that shows you the 4 types. We have carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and proteins. And those are all 4 things that are found in all living things. Scientists below, I actually have a study guide for you guys. Their quiz on Friday, I'm going to have both definitions, but I'm also going to have picture identification. And there is a slideshow up already that has the different scientists, and I want you guys to practice with that. So this one is a biochemist, so you can see in the picture. She has chemicals around her, but she also has a plant in front of her, and that's how I'm trying to get you to realize that it's not just a chemist, it's actually a biochemist. Okay, Earth and Space Science is our next section here. We're going to start with the basic person that studies earth science, and we call those geologists. There's a lot of different things that fall into the category of being geology. One thing I want to point out is geo is a prefix that means earth. And anytime you see ology or logist is what it comes from, that is a study of. So a geologist literally means earth study. The picture that you'll see in the review that I gave you guys is actually this one. So you can notice it's that she's looking at different rocks. So that's how I want you to realize that she is a geologist, because geologists focus on rocks. Next one is a hydrologist. Hydro means water. I also want you to learn these different prefixes, so when you see these names, it gives you a little indication of what they study. So hydrologist is a scientist that studies water. There's different types of hydrologists. We'll actually talk about one of them, limnologist, that studies rivers. The picture that you'll see in the review, I think, is this one. So this is a large water source that these 2 scientists are studying. So again, hydro means water, so this is the study of water. Next one is limnologist. A limnologist is a scientist that studies inland waters such as rivers and lakes. The picture you'll see in the scientist review is this one right here. You have 3 individuals, and they are actually in a stream, and they're taking water samples. Next one is hydrogeologist. So we have 2 root words here I want to point out. Hydro means water, and geo means earth. So this literally means water earth studier, basically. So a hydrogeologist is a scientist that studies water that's found inside dirt and rocks. The picture you'll see is this one. This is an individual that's taking samples from soil that has a water source with it. So that's a hydrogeologist. Next one is a mineralogist. A mineralogist is an individual that studies minerals. There's many different types of minerals. If you decide to take earth science next year, you'll actually get to learn about a whole bunch of different kinds of minerals. This person, the picture that you'll see in the scientist review is this one right here. A mineralogist, he is taking samples from a river and looking to see what kind of minerals are in the riverbed. Next one is a metallurgist. A metallurgist is a person that studies metals. So this is a more specific type. Metals can be related to minerals. A metallurgist is going to do a lot of different things with metals. The picture that you'll see is this one right here. I picked this one because you can see that there's some molten metal that's visible, and that's what I want you guys to recognize. Like, oh, that's a metallurgist. Next one is a seismologist. A seismologist is an individual that studies earthquakes. So this person down here, this is the picture that you will see. He is actually looking at what's called a seismograph, and a seismograph looks at the intensity of earthquakes by looking at the different waves that are formed from the vibrations of the earthquake itself. So it's a seismologist. Next one is a volcanologist. A volcanologist is an individual that studies volcanoes. So this one should be pretty straightforward. A volcano is in the word, so it's a volcano studier. The picture that you will see is this one right here. So he's wearing a suit that protects him from the heat. Stratigrapher is next. A stratigrapher studies rocks and layers. The picture you'll see is this one right here. So there's an individual in front of a wall made of rock, and you can see that there's very obvious layers in that picture. So that is a person that studies rock layers. Geochronologist. A geochronologist is very close to a person that studies rock layers. A geochronologist is actually going to study how old rocks are. So chrono or chronological order would be something that goes by date, and that has to do with time. So a geochronologist is a person that looks at the different rocks and the dates of those rocks. A person that makes maps. This is a person that's going to take data that's collected from surveyors and produce a map of the area. Meteorologist is the next one. A meteorologist is a scientist that studies weather patterns. Meteorologists are always found on television at news stations to help individuals be warned about major weather that might be happening in the area. So a meteorologist studies weather patterns. These are different type of things that can happen. The picture you'll see in the scientist review is this one right here. So we have floods. You can have a severe thunderstorm, tornadoes. Those are things that will be warned by a meteorologist. Next one is a climatologist. A climatologist is a scientist that studies the climate. So I have two different pictures here. This one right here, they're in a snowy environment taking climate samples. And then this one right here, they're in a more temperate area. This is actually the picture right here on the right that you will see in the scientist review. So again, a climatologist is a person that studies climates. That's another one that should be a gimme one because climate is in the question. Another gimme, glaciologist. A glaciologist is a scientist that studies glaciers. Glacier is in the name, so don't forget this one. This is a person that studies glaciers. You'll see a picture similar to this one right here. Again, a glaciologist studies glaciers. They're taking samples from the glaciers. They're going to look at if there's any chemicals that are found in them. You can actually see what ancient weather would have been like looking at samples of glaciers as well. Oceanographer is our next one. An oceanographer is a person that studies the oceans. Now, there are actually different types of oceanographers, physical oceanographers and chemical oceanographers. We're not going to get into the specifics. I just want you to know that an oceanographer studies oceans. Again, ocean is in the name, so this is a person that studies oceans. This one is actually a physical oceanographer. This is a picture you'll see. He's actually looking at the waves that are being created in that water source. Astronomers next. There are several prefixes again that I want you guys to learn. This one has one. Astro. Astro means star. So an astronomer is a scientist that studies the stars and planets. The picture that you will see is this one right here. So he has a telescope there that he uses to look at different planets. Next one is an agronomist. Agronomist is a scientist that studies soil and crop raising. So they're going to help farmers. They're going to see how the crops are doing, count the crop output and stuff like that. The way I want you to remember this is if you take an ag class, it's usually has a basis in farming. So ag is farming. So this is how I want you guys to remember soil and crop raising. Now we're going to talk about life science. First one is a biologist. Biologist is a scientist that studies life. Bio prefix actually means life, so that's a way to remember that one. The picture that you will see is this one over here. Marine biologist, this is a more specific type of biologist. A marine biologist is an individual that's going to study sea life, a little bit coral, different types of fish, and anything that's in the ocean that's alive. And this is a picture you'll see in the scientist review. Next one is ecologist. Eco goes with ecosystem. So an ecologist is a scientist that studies the environment and organism interactions. Microbiologist is next. Micro actually means small and bio means life. So microbiologist literally means the study of small living things. Okay, microbiologist is going to study microorganisms such as bacteria. I did put microorganisms in the definition on purpose, and that's so you can identify micro in both the name and definition. Next one is a cytologist. Cyto is actually another one of the prefixes that I want you to learn. Cyto means cell, so a cytologist is a scientist that studies cells. Next one is a geneticist. Geneticists actually study DNA and inheritance. The picture that I have for you is this one right here. She's actually looking at a DNA micrograph, and that is what scientists use to study DNA samples. So she's trying to see the comparison between two DNA samples. Botanist is a person that studies plants. So the way you'll be able to identify this in the scientist practice is there will be a scientist that's looking at different plants. Zoologist. A zoologist is a scientist that studies all different types of animals. There's actually specific types of scientists. So this will be a little tricky in the scientist review, but this is the one that I'm using to indicate a zoologist. And that's because on her chest, she actually has the word zoo on her shirt. Okay, I'm going to talk about the different specific types of zoologists. First one is a herpetologist. Herpetologists actually study amphibians and reptiles. Picture you'll see is this one. He's holding a type of caiman, which is like an alligator or crocodile. Next one is an ornithologist. Ornithologist is an individual that studies birds. So ornithologist is birds. Ichthyologist. An ichthyologist is a specific type of zoologist that studies fish. And a mammologist. A mammologist is a type of zoologist that studies mammals. So mammal again is in the name and mammal is in the definition. There's also an entomologist. An entomologist is a scientist that studies insects. A way I want you to remember this is ant kind of sounds like ant, and ants are a type of insects. So again, an entomologist studies insects. Ant is kind of sounds like ant, and an ant is a type of insect. Okay, our last branch is actually social science, and there's a couple scientists I put in this category. Social science is not a natural science, it's more social behavior, so it's going to focus on humans a little bit more. First one is an economist. An economist is a scientist that studies the economy. Next one is a psychologist. A psychologist is a scientist that studies human behavior. So psychologists are going to help people that have mental disorders. Also, if someone goes through something traumatic, a psychologist could help them work it out. So again, a psychologist studies human behavior. If you've ever heard the term psyche has to do with the mind, and that's how you can remember a psychologist is a human behavior. Geographer is our next one. A geographer studies countries and regions. Picture you'll see is this one right here. They are surveying the area. They're going to work hand in hand with cartographers to help make maps of the area. So a geographer. Archaeologist. An archaeologist is a scientist that studies past cultures. So they're going to look at past human cultures, how they lived, maybe their languages that they left. Anthropologist. An anthropologist is a scientist that studies people and primates. There is actually a branch that specifically just studies non-human primates. So this is going to actually focus more on people. So an anthropologist. Anthro actually means something to do with humans. Picture you'll see is this one. This is a forensic anthropologist that's studying a skeleton to see how that person died. One is paleontologist. A paleontologist is a scientist who studies prehistoric forms of life. Paleontology is usually famously related to dinosaurs. There are different types of paleontologists, though. They can study uh, paleobotanist that looks at plants. And our last one for today is primatologist. A primatologist studies non human primates. That's going to include monkeys and apes, so gorillas, chimpanzees. The picture that I have for this one right here is this scientist is holding a chimp in her arms, so that is a primatologist. Primatologist has the word primates in it. Okay, so this was today's lesson on scientists. If you have any questions, please let me know. There is a homework posted that goes with this. It's 50 questions. Please don't try to attempt that until you've actually taken your notes so you have them in front of you. They're going to include questions that ask you about the different prefixes and also the definitions. And then there's a section called scientist scenarios. It's actually going to give you an example of someone, what they're doing, and you're going to tell me what kind of scientist they are.